Hello, my name is Debbie Boone, and I want to welcome you to my podcast, The Bend, where we explore how successful people navigated the path and emerged in a better place when life threw them an unexpected twist. It's inspired by one of my favorite sayings: the bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the curve. These conversations will hopefully help you and inspire you to embrace your personal bend and to flourish. I hope you enjoy it, and if you need help with your own personal navigation and you're in veterinary medicine, please feel free to reach out to me at Debbie Boone to Manage Vets Consulting. Enjoy the bend and be inspired by our wonderful guest. Welcome. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's episode of The Bend. My name is Debbie Boone, and I am your host. And today I have a long-term buddy of mine, Tori Williams. Now, Tori brings over a decade of experience in veterinary and shelter operations with expertise, team development, efficiency, and successful strategic planning. So she has served as the Chief Operating Officer at Fear Free, which is where we met because I was on the Fear Free Advisory Board since its inception in 2016. But she's shelter is her heart, so she's moved to be the director of Shelter Veterinary Services at Humane Colorado, which was formerly Dumb Friends League. She was the hospital director at the Richmond SPCA. She was the founder of Lemonade Coaching and Consulting and applied her shelter and veterinary experience to help organizations implement practical, adaptable strategies that reduce fear, anxiety, and stress for both animals and staff. And now she is the head of shelters for Casco Pet. And so she is working to innovate unique housing solutions for shelters that allow pets to show their natural behavior, reduce their stress, and ultimately lead to their adoption. So, Tori, thank you very much for joining me today on The Bend. And as somebody who, for 3.5 years of my career, had oversight of kind of a county shelter that was one of the old school shelters that was just, outdoors and chain link fence. And, we worked really hard to improve that. I really appreciate what you're doing, and I absolutely love the Casco enclosures. When I saw those things, I went, oh my God, these are so beautiful. And I love the fact that, they changed the color and it can calm the animals, and everything about it just made my heart sing for animals in shelter situations particularly, but, hospitalized cases too. It's just great. So welcome to The Bend. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Debbie.
Sure. So tell us a little bit about how you got started in your profession, because I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, and animal health is not how you went to college. It's not where you...
Not even a little bit. You are correct. So I went to college with the hope of actually working internationally in the FBI. That was always my goal. My dad is retired as a military, and we moved all over the world. So I thought that was what I wanted to do. But when I was home from studying criminal justice and Homeland Security, I got a little part-time job at a local vet hospital just when I was home on break. And I absolutely loved it. It was a family-owned vet hospital in Yorktown, Virginia. I got to just experience every single part of it. They did grooming, they did boarding, and they did some daycare. I got to do the front desk. I got to help with x-rays, and I just absolutely loved it. I always looked forward to going home on breaks. So after college, I had the opportunity, or was in kind of discussions, to join the FBI as an intern. And as happens, the government was on one of its many hiring freezes. So they said, you can come and we'd love to have you intern. We can't pay you, and we don't know when we can pay you, but come on down to DC. And I said, at 21 years old, I was like, I'm not going to be doing that. I won't be working for free. So I went to my local animal shelter because, again, I loved my experience working at the vet hospital, and we had moved a little further away, so I couldn't go back there. I went to my local animal shelter and worked part-time in the gift shop. That's how I really got started. And I, helped fit collars on dogs going home, process adoption fees. And during that time, they said, hey, we're starting this pilot clinic for low-cost veterinary care, community medicine. We have no idea if it will work. We don't even know if anybody needs it. That's why it's a pilot program, which in retrospect is so funny, because it was like, well, fingers crossed. So I actually moved over there to be a client service representative. Quickly kind of became in charge of all customer service for this pilot clinic. And while they went through a pretty big fundraising campaign and surprised the community did need these lower cost services, as we would expect now, we actually moved into a full service veterinary hospital where we had a really, a large team I absolutely loved it. By the time I left, we were doing urgent care walk-ins. We were doing orthopedic surgeries. We were doing some rehab services, and we had also created an extremely cohesive network of human nonprofit services in our local area. So somebody could come into us and say, I have this pet and I may be having some financial challenges. And then in the course of conversation, we would learn more about their situation and we could directly help them. I have one example. We had an older senior citizen woman and her dog was morbidly obese, to the point where the dog was having some real mobility issues, some real challenges. And the team, in talking with her, realized it was because she had some pretty significant food insecurity. And all she had to eat was boxes of pasta. So she was eating the pasta, her dog was eating the pasta. And the team, we were able, because we had set this network up, able to immediately help her with this other piece. Yes, we could help the dog, but we could also put her in touch with the right services to help her
Yeah.
out. So
Yeah.
when I left there, I came out to Colorado for to work with the Dumb Friends League, now called Humane Colorado, where I was the director of vet services. And through my time there, oversaw all kinds of different things, different shelter, veterinary operations, our foster care department, spay neuter vans. We opened a new clinic or a new shelter out in a very rural part of Colorado, which we had to establish veterinary care out there. So a good adventure, I would say. From there, I went to Fear Free, as you mentioned, and I was the chief operating officer there for 3 years. Did some consulting after I left Fear Free, got to do some really great education and webinars and kind of get back to the shelter talk. And that's where I knew Casco from my time at Fear Free and came to them and said, hey, there really needs to be some innovation in shelter housing options. Really, there aren't a lot of options. And hey, you guys should do that. And here's a plan. And then they said, do you want to do your plan? And I was like, I actually would love to do that plan. So that's where I'm at now. And it's absolutely amazing. It's getting to bring all of these different experiences, all my shelter work, staff work, fear-free work, and kind of put it all together. It's been a fun few months, and I'm looking forward to the
Yeah.
future there.
Well, I mean, the puzzle pieces, it's wonderful that they all came together like this because,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, as someone who had not, we had worked, the first practice that I worked with, we worked with the shelter because it was owned by the county and all the veterinarians in the community. And of course, this is old school, would do the spays and neuters for the shelters because people had vouchers. Well, then after one of my boss's good friends, who was just a wonderful philanthropist, kind of took over the shelter because it was a hot mess. She said, these animals aren't getting neutered. The people are getting their vouchers, but they still don't come. And so we still not are doing population control. So we started doing a little bit of transport back and forth where we had more control over that and then sending them out already neutered. So we always done a lot of work. And then somebody came in and Humane Society built a clinic, which I was very excited about because my practice was one of the I laughed and called it was the country club practice, right? It was the doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs. Everybody came there, the city council, the mayor, the head of Jefferson Pilot Insurance, all of those people. But every now and then you would have people who really could not afford what we offered. And I wanted to have somewhere for them to go. So I was pretty excited about having another tool in my tool belt because I always like to figure it out, right? That was my job. I used to teach my staff, even if we can't help them, we can help. And that's, you need to have tools, right? You need to have access. You need to have a network of places for people to go. So pretty excited about that. But then, it's become more common for shelters to have their own veterinary hospital and to do all their work. And so you kind of lose the connection between private veterinarians and of course, we were losing money on it right and left. But it did establish a relationship with a veterinarian for people who had
Mm-hmm.
new animals. And I feel like that's really important is that they establish care and then you're their guide to having them build a good relationship with their pet. As we know from both of our work on Fear Free, so much of relinquishment comes from improper training and not an understanding of animal behavior by the people who adopt them. So they
Right.
turn around and, it want to exchange them like a purse. And we're like, no, that's not really how this works.
Yeah.
So it's just amazing. I've been doing this 40 years and looking back at what it was and how it is really incredible. And I think in general, veterinary medicine, the profession, and animal health providers and shelter medicine providers, we should all pat ourselves on the back for the work that's been done because it has improved
Mhm.
dramatically over what it was. Absolutely. Yeah.
Dramatically, exactly, and having a way to give a solution to kind of what we were
Yes.
saying. It's impactful for the person, it's impactful for the pet, and then think about the staff too. I mean,
Yeah.
just no staff member wants to say, we can't help you, full
Yeah.
stop, goodbye. Like
Yeah.
nobody wants that feeling. Nobody
Yeah.
likes that. And so it's so important to your point. Like
Yeah.
this network has been created so that it doesn't ever have to be a full stop.
Right.
No, it's just a matter about like learning and making those
Yeah.
connections and things like that. Because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, like I just think about how the staffing and myself included have been in
Yeah.
situations like that where, and it just, it feels terrible. Like the
Yeah.
staff
It
feels
does.
terrible. Everybody feels bad about that
Mhm.
interaction. And then similarly, we need folks to also understand what a veterinary office does and who it is, and that it's a positive interaction,
Mhm.
and that we're a source of assistance, whether we can actually as an office can do that for you because of whatever it needs to be. But treating someone with that kindness and being able to give them another resource, that's going to create a ripple effect of this
Yeah.
person's perception of the veterinary profession.
Yeah.
Like it's so
Absolutely.
much bigger than just like, yeah, can you afford it? No, okay. It's like there's so much more to it,
Right.
as you know. So
Yeah.
it's, yeah, it's very cool. To your point, it's come along. We still have work to do, as we always
Oh, yeah.
will, but
Absolutely.
it's come a really long way.
It has. It
Yeah.
has. And of course, the challenge of misinformation is plaguing every aspect of animal health out there in the world. So that's now a new challenge that we have to overcome is
Mhm.
the kind of quackery that's out there and the harm that's coming to animals because of those kind of things and the push that we're dealing with. I laugh and say, if you want to get, a conversation started that goes downhill quickly, talk about food, right? Just don't
Yeah.
talk about pet food. So I'm trying to avoid the pet food conversation. But
Yeah,
it's important.
exactly.
It's an important part of nutrition. And,
Mm,
and we need to be having those conversations with our clients, but we need to be preparing them for things. And it's really and in your work, I mean, you're contacting shelters a lot. My question to you is, are you seeing a lot more relinquishment in the last, several months than maybe in the past? I mean, because the economy, the inflation is up, and people seem to be struggling to pay for their animals and their animals' care. Because I am on next door here in my neighborhood, and I'm shocked at how many people are on there going, I have two 1-year-old dogs, and I need to rehome them, or I have a cat and I need to rehome it, and I can't do for it what it needs to be done. And I'm like, man, I would cut my leg off before I'd give my dog away. I mean, I really, I just can't imagine doing that. But then again, I know what it takes to care for one, so I didn't get into it blindly. And I think sometimes there's
right.
there's a part of education that we're missing too when the
Yeah.
public is thinking
Mhm.
about that. Yeah.
I would say and from what my conversations have been, I mean, mine are a little bit different. I would say relinquishment comes up, but more comes to me is how much shelters, which continues to amaze me, how much shelters are doing to prevent relinquishment. Like the days are not gone, but are much, there's less of,
Mhm.
what maybe you experience in your days. And I did in mine as well when I was in the shelter work of like night drop kennels, or
Oh
just
gosh,
walk
yeah.
in if you have an animal you can't care for, just we'll take it. And I think there is a time and place for that. I mean, certainly there needs to be resources, otherwise we'll end up with other problems. But the amount of shelters that I speak to, especially now through Casco, because of what we do, that are creating and opening their own veterinary resources, that are opening their own food banks, are like really trying to take providing training for owners,
Mhm.
really asking people to take some of that accountability, but also giving them a path to get there. Because I
Mhm.
think that to me is where it can get really challenging, is if you say, like, well, you should just keep them because they're
Mhm.
yours. It's like,
Right.
that's like telling me you should go cut down this big tree. I would be like, I don't know how to do that.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
like you have to give them someone a path. And then, yes, they might still make the choice of like,
Mhm.
it's not really about that, like there's so much I think being done to help people keep their animals. And I think there has to be also an openness to say, and if this isn't the right fit for you, or this
Right.
doesn't work with your life, or
Yeah.
there could be many other layers underneath
Oh,
of it.
sure.
At some point we do want a safe place for the
Yeah.
animal to go. So I would say relinquishment continues to be a challenge,
Mhm.
especially with costs of literally everything.
Everything.
But I do see shelters, yeah, really, really trying.
Mhm.
And I think it's also in my time with Casco too, what's been interesting is, you know, the people who are stepping up. Like I talked to this one very nice group who was in one of the Dakotas. They've never had an animal shelter in their community ever. They don't have that as a resource.
Mhm.
And this group of ladies got together and they raised some money. And I talked to them when they were in a church basement one afternoon, and they said, we found this and we're going to do this, and we don't know if we know all the information, but we know our community needs this resource because it's just getting bad.
Uh-huh.
And as private citizens, we can't just keep like taking animals off next
Yeah.
door. We need to create some infrastructure. And it was incredible to me. I was like, man,
Yeah.
people are so smart and good, and when they
Yeah.
see a challenge, they figure it out. So I say that because the range of resources, whether it be these very nice ladies in a church basement creating something, or bigger organizations, saying we're going to create community centers and food banks
Mhm.
and low cost spay neuter and low cost ongoing care or
Mhm.
urgent, whatever it is. Like, everyone is really trying to mitigate that kind of
Mhm.
knee jerk reaction of like, I need to give my pet away. There's
Right.
there's a lot of resources.
Yeah.
Again, never seems to be enough, but
No.
from a hopeful standpoint, people are really shifting their perspective
Yeah.
of like, let's just build the shelters bigger and bigger,
Right.
and instead let's diversify what it is we're actually
Yeah.
providing our community, which
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
is really important. And
It
it's been
is.
a shift even in, the past 10, 15,
Yeah.
20 years. I mean, it's still kind of actively happening. I mean,
Yes.
so
Yes.
it's exciting to see what we can
Yeah.
project forward.
Well, I think humans are, when given opportunity, are creative problem solvers.
Mhm.
The good thing, I'm kind of a data geek. I'm not one of those people who just loves to, work on technology, but I love what data tells and the stories that it tells. So finding out why people are relinquishing
Mhm.
their animals, and a lot of times it's their own food insecurity, like you said about the elderly lady, or there's physical limitations that have now manifested in their lives that they cannot walk their dog. So maybe we provide somebody who volunteers to walk the dog a couple of times a day, and then they
Mhm.
can still keep their dog at home. Um, so I think that creative thinking, that creative problem solving is really fascinating and gratifying. You're right. I mean, it's fun to see that people find a problem, work together, and solve it. And I
Right.
think that that's just animal people, I feel like, are really always motivated to help in a way that goes above and beyond, probably to our
Mhm.
own detriment. We're probably a little crazy about it
Sometimes,
sometimes,
yeah.
but that's it. I mean, we might fuss a lot about the profession that we're in, but I really do think that we automatically are working in the profession filled with wonderful people. And I've always said our clients are probably some of the best clients and customers you can have because they're tolerant. I mean, everybody who has a cat and who has gotten up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and stepped in a wet hairball gets it, right?
Mhm.
We're just going to tolerate some stuff as animal
Mhm.
people, and the fur that we deal with all the time and the craziness that our animals will get us into. So it's as it is always, you could work at Walmart, consider that would be the worst job on the earth, I think, is to work at Walmart where everybody's just mad all the time, right? Um,
I know. Yeah, yes.
yeah. So, thinking about the norms, I mean, and obviously shelter medicine, like I said, from the time I was in the profession, it was basically storage, right? It was definitely a storage facility. And then hope for the best that somebody came to pick up their animal, and then there was, paperwork to be done, and off they went. And that was about it. So looking at from your perspective, how has other things changed in the shelter world and in the way that shelters are managed and animals are adopted out, and even looking at it from the fear free perspective, because I was really excited that fear free created a module just for shelter because it is the most stressful environment an animal can be in for the most
Mhm.
part. So how do
Yeah.
you see all
Oh,
that evolving? Big
together,
question. Sorry,
yes.
Tori.
No, I love it. I mean, honestly, Debbie, this is like what I love to talk about.
Oh,
So,
good.
I'm very appreciative of it, of the
Yeah.
opportunity to do so. I think some of the biggest changes I've seen in the shelter world from my time in there, I think number one, what we just talked about, right? The this how do we get people to keep their pets? How do we find where the pain points are and try to help solve them? How do we provide community options, food banks, things like this? I think that in itself is a big shift. Even shelters now, you'll see they may have built a capacity where they can hold all of these animals, and sometimes those are still needed, but sometimes it's not. And you see
Mhm.
shelters doing really creative things with that space to still use it, to still, I would say, also be a connector in the community. They're not just, to your point, like a dumping ground. Like,
Mhm.
you look at old architecture and like where shelters used to be located within counties and municipalities, they were usually down by like the trash, like by a
That's right,
dump,
the
by like
landfill and
the landfills, municipal buildings, whatever it is, where you only kind of went there if you had like a something.
right.
Now they're being put in the middle of communities. They're trying to be lighter, brighter spaces. They're really, I see shelters really putting that into place, which I
Mhm.
think is wonderful. The From my time at Fear Free and even before that, I think this kind of commitment to the enrichment of pets and not making it, again, to your point, just be a holding space, just
Mhm.
kind of be a last stop on the train. People, volunteers, staff, educators, behaviors, all the people, right? Vets, they're saying we can't just like take in a dog and put it in a cage. Like, that
Mhm.
doesn't actually help that dog. That definitely doesn't help the people who are having to witness that dog every day. And it's not going to help this dog when it eventually goes into an adoptive home.
Mhm.
So seeing shelters really put in enrichment that is behaviorally focused, that is meant to solve the problem of that animal, solve a problem, I guess, of
Mhm.
the animal. Cats, dogs, doesn't matter. That's been a pretty significant shift, which has
Mhm.
been really great to see. I love, obviously, to see that. And then lastly, I would say, is this conversation around burnout and the people aspect of it. One
Mhm.
of my big, I would say, proud moments at Fear Free was as adding content to Fear Free and starting to talk more about what Fear Free for people looks like you and I have
Yeah.
discussed. Because we can have the most amazing enrichment programs for animals. We can provide veterinary care. We can do all these great things for this animal. But if the people in that network are burning out, are miserable, are hating their lives, are just challenged, I mean, it's not going to ultimately do what's needed for the animal,
Mhm.
because those people are going to just be turning over, or they're going to be doing their best with what they can, but or what they have, but ultimately it's not sustainable for
Mhm.
anybody involved. So I've seen
Mhm.
shelters similar to what we kind of saw in the vet space, right? This kind of burnout was the big word,
Yeah.
right, for a couple of years. It still is, but very much like that concept and what we can do about it is being spoken about in shelters, because I do think the reality of shelter work is becoming more clear. It's not
Yeah.
just like in vet med, right? Like,
Yeah.
we hear like, oh, that's so fun, you must get to play with, like, see
Uh,
cute puppies every day, and
yeah.
you that's not the reality for veterinary offices. That's not the reality for shelters. So I
Right.
think finally there's more conversation of like, so what do we need to do to support the staff,
Mhm.
and for shelters too, the volunteers. Like,
Mhm.
these are really well-meaning, committed, dedicated people who we need to support their mental health as well. We need
Mhm.
to find ways to keep them engaged and excited and coming back, volunteer or not. They're still a prime part of that ecosystem to care for
Mhm.
these pets. And sometimes they're the ones who get to do more of the fun stuff. So we really,
Yeah.
my last shelter at Humane Colorado, our volunteers were a huge, we couldn't have done an enrichment program if we didn't have volunteers
Right.
leading some of that charge and doing the actual going into the
Mhm.
kennels and dropping off the things and picking them back up. Like, it's
Mhm.
all time. So
Oh, yeah.
I'm really excited about that, because that's a huge passion point of
Mhm.
mine, is the people side of animal welfare, because it just, one can't exist without the other.
Yeah.
And I'm the least technically proficient shelter animal work. Like, don't make me hold anything. I don't know. I don't pretend to know. Please don't make me do it.
Uh-huh.
Even when I used to go talk to, go in the dental suite with the vets, they would be like, just come in there. And I would be like, I don't know. I hate the noise. Like, I'm such a baby about it, but I am good. I love talking to the people side of
Uh-huh.
things. And
Yeah.
so that's something that, it really makes me hopeful that we're continuing that conversation,
Yeah.
because that just hasn't always been
Yeah.
the case. So
I
that's
agree.
that's
Yeah.
like my biggest win.
Yes.
I
Yeah,
would
I
say.
think, I agree with you because, having just I kind of got thrown into it as the chief operating officer for a veterinary hospital that actually managed the shelter for the county. They had a contract with the county to manage the shelter. And when I got there, my management operations head kicked in and went, man, you can't even call this place to find out if you have a pet. Now you have to remember this was like 2007. So there was no phone
Mhm.
number for the county shelter. So if your pet was lost, what did you do? So the first thing I did was hit up my Pfizer rep at the time and say, I need some money for a really big banner to put on this fence to put a phone number on here. And those are the kind of building blocks that you just start with some logistics and just practical operational stuff to make the workflow better. But now looking at, I've been into some shelters. I did some work with the San Francisco SPCA, which is one of the oldest ones in the United States,
Mhm.
and the programs are amazing. And the shelter itself is just incredible. It has murals on the wall, and it has the a trolley car for the animals to play in, and the volunteers are coming in and out, and there are people who are behaviorists who are working with some of the challenging animals, and the volunteers are working with them to kind of make them adoptable, or at least work with people who want to adopt them. And that's not saying that there aren't animals there who have been there way too long, because they do have behavior problems. And so shining the light on that kind of stuff too, I think has been incredibly helpful, because the relinquishment of animals who are fearful, and I don't want to say that they bite people, but maybe they bite people and it's because people are not reading their signals and they don't understand to stop, or it drives me crazy. One of my pet peeves is seeing children and dogs in some of the situations on social media. And, we are both fear-free trained. And if you look at that and your heart is in your throat going, look at the body language of that dog. It does not want this child to do this. It is restraining itself for all it's worth. And I don't blame it if it nips this child, because it's
Mhm.
whatever it's doing is painful. I read something the other day and I thought was brilliant. We ask so much of our dogs. We ask them to go against so much of their natural behavior to conform to
Mhm.
our lives and do stuff to them that, particularly you think about in veterinary medicine, where we're sticking them with needles and putting e-collars on their heads and trying to roll them over so we can manipulate their joints. And then we expect them to be tolerant and just take it. And you kind of look, would I take it? I mean, I bit my dentist when I was a child. He hurt me and I bit him. And he never let me forget it because he was a friend of my family. But it was a reflex, right? And we
Mhm.
really do expect our animals to not act like animals
Yeah.
with their natural behavior. So
Mhm.
it's a really interesting. So let's talk a little about what you're doing now and about the enclosures, because I can remember what, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, when these cages came onto the trade show floor and I was at VMX, and I was drawn to these things like a moth to a light, right? I went over there and went, oh my gosh. And then having the explanation of how the light changes in them and how it helps with
Mhm.
their the animals, and helps them sleep. And I don't know if you've been in the hospital, but I certainly have. And in human health, they don't care. You're gonna, there is no rest for sick people in the
Mhm.
hospital. And I think the fact that these Casco enclosures are actually helping animals rest, which is vital to getting
Right.
well, is
Mhm.
amazing. So, what are you guys doing to modify? I mean, because they're not cheap by any stretch of the imagination, but
Mhm.
they are incredible for our patients.
Yeah.
And so, how is that?
Yeah.
How is that playing into shelter?
You bet. So we have some new kennels. They're called care kennels. So they don't have the lighting kind of structure in that way, but they're still very much based on fear-free infrastructure. So still
Hmm.
with the quiet latches, still with the material that it's made out of is still meant to be warmer, not in the sense of the temperature, but warmer in the sense that it's not as like cold and sterile
Hmm.
like steel is.
Hmm.
So the material itself that's, waterproof, all of these pieces, still a really, really a great way in a shelter to make sure that you're maintaining, herd health, keeping things sterile and clean, and all the different things happening
Mhm.
in the shelter with the quiet locking latches. And then we have different kind of variabilities of how you can get that material and those doors kind of together. So we have these really, I think, very cool cat condos that, have the main, I always call it like the living room, like the main
Uh-huh.
space, and then the two other spaces for, like, resting areas, litter, all things like that. That one you can get if you want, like, the
Mhm.
lighting and, the electric. But then we have these other enclosure banks that you can modify in different ways. You can do the portals, you can kind of change the structure so that we're using all of the space in a shelter. And because we can also do storage that kind of goes into one unit,
Mhm.
nothing pains me more than seeing a shelter that is filled to the brim with animals and then big empty walls that are like, and then stuff everywhere. Again,
Yeah.
I get it.
Oh, yeah.
Believe me, I get it. I'm
Yeah.
not, this is no shit on any specific shelter, but then you're like, oh man, we could use this space so well in a way that is not only great for the animals, but great for the staff. Because I
Yes.
think we don't always think about from a staff perspective. If
Oh,
you are
yes.
going into a space every day that is dark and messy and dirty, even if it doesn't look dirty, or
Mhm.
it's not actually dirty, but it kind of looks a
It's just
little disheveled,
cluttered. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
clutter, and then you're having dogs barking at you and
Yeah.
cats meow. It's like it impacts the team in a way where I have really loved in the conversations I've getting to have is because our team, our products are manufactured in Portugal, and we have a really amazing team there who can do in drawings and kind of do this kind of back and forth. It's not like we say, here's our catalog of product, what do you
Mhm.
want? We say, give us, what are you looking for? Like, what's your animal capacity you're hoping for, whether it be big, small, whatever.
Mhm.
We look at the Association of Shelter Veterinarian guidelines to make sure that what we're recommending is within that, as well as any
Mhm.
kind of statewide statutes. Like New York put out a big one, I think it was last year. So we look at all that, and then we can just start kind of going back and forth, and we can say, yes, this one wall space is an awkward amount of space. It's 3 feet. You can't probably put an animal in there, but what you could do is you could make it a storage capacity for leashes, treats. Maybe we looked at a cat space where you could do where, like, if you know that this is where cats are going to be living, we could build in where cat carriers are going to go so that you
Mhm.
can use the same carrier throughout this cat's time in the shelter. I mean, we really try to make it a kind of comprehensive experience so that
Yeah.
we're giving them the right product. The kennels, that's important. Every animal and every shelter needs it. Even the free roaming shelters,
Yeah.
there's still kennels in those shelters.
Yeah.
Every animal needs a kennel in some capacity or not.
Mhm.
But how can that's to me is the jumping off point. Like
Mhm.
having great kennels, having quiet locking doors, having things that are not contributing to a noisy space is
Mhm.
important. But how can we also make the experience where the shelter is getting this feedback and getting
Mhm.
to have these conversations? And to me, it doesn't matter. Are you doing a whole redoing a whole room of cats? Or are you doing one room of cats?
Mhm.
Regardless, I love to talk about this kind of stuff and how we can use the space that's going to help the animals, but also help the people, help
Yeah.
the volunteers, make it organized, make it clean, bright, modern looking, all of these
Mhm.
pieces. So coming kind of jumping into the shelter world in this way
Mhm.
has been incredibly impactful. Shelters are no two shelters are the same. Like you said,
Right.
San Francisco SPCA, amazing organization nationally, probably internationally, obviously
Mhm.
recognized. To the ladies I spoke to in the church basement, those are both shelters. They both
Yeah.
fall into shelter,
Yeah.
but they're completely different in their needs. And
Yeah.
because of my work with Fear Free, with consulting, my kind of boots on the ground work in shelters, I'm able to speak all of that language in a way
Mhm.
that we've gotten really good feedback of people just being excited to talk and to
Yeah.
know that there's options.
Yeah.
One of my big pushes in, I guess, life is that the shelter industry and the professionals that work within it are seen as business people, are seen as people who are, they're not just looking for the cheapest option. These are
Mhm.
people who have so many different priorities on their plate, staff, animals, maybe a government contract, donors, community. I mean, a million things. And so I want to be there to be helpful to them, but also speak their language at their time and place. Um, so we have amazing product, I would say, and we do a lot of the support work. I can help with grant writing. If you're trying
Mm.
to do something like that, I can.
Mhm.
If you have a donor that you're like, you know what, we have a donor who loves cats. I bet they would help us fund
Yeah.
this. Let me help you make a PowerPoint presentation. Like,
Uh-huh.
let me take some of that burden off because I
Uh-huh.
think with shelters, where a lot of them are in survival mode every
Right.
day. They want to, it's like when you're at your house and you're like, I really should redo the like
Uh,
I should redo those cabinets. And then 6 years later, you're like, yeah, one
oh,
day I should redo those
one
cat,
day
but
I'm going to
you
do
kind of
that.
get used to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
just kind of get used to looking at
Right.
them. And I
Yeah.
think that that can happen in any industry,
Oh,
obviously, but
absolutely.
in shelters, when you have animals coming in and out constantly,
Uh-huh.
it's easy to kind of always be reacting to what's
Uh-huh.
in front of you. So that's why I'm like, let me help step back from some of that and give you some of this
Yeah.
insight and show you what it could be. And I
Right.
would say too, as you said, the well kennels with the lighting and stuff they're not cheap. They're not
Hmm.
meant to be cheap, but
Right. No.
we do have a really, really great price point on these other options meant
Mhm.
to be in the context of the
Of
shelter
the shelter.
world, the nonprofit space. And then also we do give back. And then I've been negotiating some different benefits so that if anybody who does buy our kennel systems, they get this like a percentage back as a contribution
Hmm.
promise. They can spend that money with in these different ways where I just say, hey, here's some amazing folks in this industry. Got to get you on there, Debbie. But here's some amazing folks who can help you if these are areas of interest, whether it be, hey, we want to get some training on behavior, to we want to set up a sustainable grant cycle,
Hmm.
to, and about every other piece in between.
Hmm.
We've got amazing people in the
Yeah.
industry, obviously, who want to help. So we are trying to make it a fully formed conversation.
Hmm.
And we also want to hear feedback because, like I said, we manufacture our own products. Like we have an innovation team. I talked to them yesterday about a shelter who had a very specific need. We don't have a product for that now. They don't really, we can make it. We can start
Hmm.
mocking things up. We can look at what that is. So
Hmm.
that was a big reason why Casco was so important to me to join,
Yeah.
because we want to do the full experience and we can be innovating. um, One last thing about that, and then I'll
Yeah.
stop. You had asked earlier about shifts in shelters that I've seen.
Hmm.
One other shift I've seen is more shelters providing resources for other species. So whether it be rabbits,
Yeah.
guinea pigs, birds, all
Yeah.
kind. They're reacting to their communities. And what I've seen, based on just again my own anecdotal knowledge, is a lot more of rabbits and like those smaller mammal
Yeah.
pets. And so
The pocket
Casco
bits. Hmm.
got its start, yeah, working
Hmm.
in the pet retail space, PetSmart,
Hmm.
Petco, all of that. So
Hmm.
we can take all of that and transition it into
Hmm.
shelters, because we're doing a couple of projects now, or in talks to, for some really great rabbit adoption areas, because
Yeah.
shelters are getting more rabbits in. They need to get them adopted, and we need to give them the right habitat so that they
Right.
can, again, showcase their natural
Yeah.
behaviors and things like that. So that's
Yeah.
another big shift. That is not my I don't know as much about those
Uh-huh.
species. I think they're interesting,
Uh-huh.
but I think that's another good part of the team having so much knowledge in that
Yeah.
area that we can bring to shelters that previously they haven't been able to get it all in one place.
Yeah.
They might have to piecemeal it together or
Yeah.
whatever. So
Debbie Boone here. I want to take a quick break and thank you for listening to The Bend. As many of you know, I am a trainer, speaker, writer, and consultant working to make life better for the folks in the veterinary profession. If you're a practice owner or manager, you've felt it. Team burnout, difficult client conversations, and the constant pressure to do more with less. That's why I wrote Hospitality in Healthcare, the culmination of my 40 years of peopling in vet med. It gives you a clear, practical way to elevate the client experience while making work feel better for your team, not harder. If you're ready to lead a practice that feels as good as it performs, you can find the book wherever books are sold. Now, let's get back to my guest on The Bend. I think that's a really good point. Many, many years ago, when I started as a consultant, many years ago, Dr. Lori Hess called me and she wanted to start an exotics practice. And she said, do you think it'll work? And I said, where are you going to start it? And she said, outside of Manhattan. I went 100% because you have
yeah.
a population there of apartment dwellers and city dwellers, and they're going to have small and exotic pets. And so I think
Mhm.
I wouldn't put it in the middle of Kansas, but I think there,
Or
absolutely. But what I am seeing is more and more people getting, um, reptiles and the pocket pets. And, I want to say this is with, the best intention, but it is the truth. 40 years ago, people would not have invested in veterinary care for a guinea pig. They would have just gone and got a new guinea pig. And now
Mhm.
people are willing to pay. In fact, there was a study that Care Credit did recently, and for the first time, they put exotic pets in there, and they were looking at how much people are willing to spend, or on average, how much do they spend on an exotic pet, because they're trying to get, and I'm grateful for this, a reality check about how much it does cost over the
Mhm.
lifetime of a pet to own it and, feed it, house it, vet it, boarding, grooming, all the things that go with having a pet. And truthfully, some of those exotic pets, the guinea pigs, the gerbils, the small pets like that, they were right up there with the cat as far as how much they cost and how much people are willing to invest in them. So I feel like that's a smart move on the shelters to realize that those things are going to happen too, and those animals are going to need care, and
Mhm.
they do need specific habitat that we certainly could not have accommodated. I mean, we would have had to go buy an aquarium probably if somebody had given us a lizard of some kind
Mhm.
and a grow light probably. We did just to wing it
Right.
when we were doing the shelter stuff. But something you said I really want to go back to because it is so universal for all providers of animal health, except for maybe the large animal guys who are out in a barn somewhere. It is the noise level. The latches. That you made the point of the quiet closed cages. And I think about my personal experience, on busy times, and we could board 100 animals in my veterinary hospital. And we did from Memorial Day until after Labor Day, every day, all day long. And 5 veterinarians were in there working. So it was a lot of stuff going on, and 2 full-time groomers. The noise could be exhausting. The dogs
Mhm.
barking, the cages slamming shut, the latches clicking, the toenails on the floor, the phones ringing, the printers printing, people talking. I mean, it was just this cacophony. And you're like, no wonder we're exhausted at the end of the day. And then you add clutter into it. And so,
Mhm.
I'm kind of a neat freak. You wouldn't know it from looking at my office because I'm in mid-project and there's stuff everywhere. But the rest of my house, almost anybody could walk into it at any time. And my husband, thank God, is the same way. So we're both like clean freaks. And I was raised in veterinary medicine the same way. There was a place for everything and everything was put away. But then I have also been consulting for 25 years and walking into some of these practices where there are blankets falling off of shelves and it's stuff stuck anywhere and everywhere and there's no logic to where it goes. And I've seen people walking across an entire treatment room to grab a syringe when there's a drawer where they work, and it's because it was there and we added this and we moved this and we needed a spot for this, and so we just put haphazardly anywhere there was a square foot of empty counter space, we put something. And, I'm
Mhm.
glad that there are people who come in and go, no, let us organize this. One of my practices that I work with was flooded in Helene, in the mountains of North Carolina. And they got about a foot of water in their main floor. They have an apartment upstairs, but the working area of the hospital got about a foot of water in it. And the silver lining of that was they had to take absolutely everything out and put it back in a logical place rather than where it had grown since 1978, right? So I think every
Mhm.
now and then the advantage is to, and we used to do this in our practice, we would have what we call the big clean. And once a year, the entire staff came in and everybody moved everything, took the pictures off the wall, got the dog hair from behind them because you would be surprised, or not, maybe not.
Mhm.
And then we looked around and we said, okay, where do we want this to go? Where is more logical for it to go? How many steps will it save us? How much time will it save us if we don't have to reach for it by walking over here? And let's talk about it and then let's put it back there. And I feel like practices really should take a day to do that and to talk to their staff about how much aggravation it is sometimes operationally
Mhm.
to have to work in a system that's not working for you. And a lot of
Yeah.
times I feel like that is part of our mental fatigue is that your mind
Mhm.
is looking at so much clutter and it is exhausting because it's registering what things are all the time. And so having a kind of a minimalist idea of having less in your sight line actually is good for your mind. And the other thing
Mhm.
that you mentioned too that I think is, really helpful with all the programs now that we help keep animals in their homes is there is the just that moral dilemma of we can help, but we're not allowed to help because we don't have the resources to do it, or the owners don't have the resources to allow us to do it. And that is what breaks your heart, is because you
Mhm.
know you could fix it, right? You know you could fix if you only
Yeah.
had whatever it is. So
Or
yeah.
or or you have people who say, yes, as a doctor, technician, assistant,
Mhm.
CSR, whoever, who are hearing this, there is a system in place that they could help, but the only person who can make that decision is the manager who's on a call, who's busy. It's like, to me, it's like, let's make it sustainable, and
Right.
like, let's make it eat like, I'm not saying you should never be able to approve, that everyone gets a free for all, but
Right.
like, we also need to look at these systems and think, what are these frustrations?
Uh-huh.
Because a lot of times we zoom out and we go, burnout is this big industry wide thing, and we must do it, and we must fix it, and we must change it. But then you have people saying, well, we don't have money to like do a wellness program
Uh-huh.
or bring a therapist in or bring a whatever in. And that's understandable, right? I mean, I would love for us all to be able to do
Yeah.
things like that. But to what we were talking about, changing the physical space, organizing, looking at systems. I talk a lot about that
Yeah.
in my like education I've done. What are
Mhm.
systems? Are we writing down processes? Do we know what the processes are
Yes.
for these situations? Those are, I mean, they're not, I guess, free because they take time,
Yeah.
but they're free from the sake of you're not putting money out to
Right.
a service or to a
Yeah.
something like that. And I think sometimes we almost, I might be using this quote wrong, but like we miss the forest through the trees, right? We're
Right.
so worried of like, we can't let people burn out, and we should be worried about that.
Right.
But we don't look at like what's in our immediate control, because most clinics or shelters, they don't have the ability to change wages. I mean, they
Hmm.
change their own wages, yes, but that gets a little sticky, right? We're not
Right.
here to, we could probably spend a lot of time talking about that. But what I could change if I'm the manager of a clinic is how my treatment room is set up. If I'm the
Right.
manager of a shelter, I can look at, why do we have 12 bottles of cleaner and three of them are half empty? And do we really, there's only four kennels in here, and yet somehow we have bottles everywhere. It's like,
Right.
those are the types of things. And then being able to explain to the team and talk to them and say,
Mhm.
let's look at this together and make this easier for
Yeah.
all of us. That's that's time, and
Right.
that's some, change
Yeah.
management, but that's very different. And so I think anybody who is thinking of like, I want to do something, but I don't know how, what we were just talking about, looking at organizing, looking at how to make
Mhm.
your space the best it can be and used in the most efficient way
Mhm.
possible, like that has a big impact. The noise levels, all of these things. One other,
Yeah.
shelters are starting to do this, I think is really cool. They're implementing quiet time,
Yeah.
especially in the dog kennels or cat kennels, where they say no one in, no one out for 2 hours. It's quiet in here. We give
Yeah.
them enrichment, we put on music. Sure, will there be a dog maybe who doesn't know how to, get
Right.
himself to calm down? Maybe, but let's try this out. And even
Uh-huh.
years ago when I was in the shelter world, this idea came and it was immediately shut down. No, 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 no. We can't possibly tell people not to go in this dog room
Uh-huh.
for 2 hours. That's great. Like, we'll lose volunteers. People will know what to do. What if we need this? What if? Like,
Yeah.
go on and on. Now that is becoming a very normal thing that
Uh-huh.
shelters are doing to try and impact, again, the lives of these animals who are in these rooms, but the people, because now they get a moment to be like, okay,
Oh,
I
yeah.
can take a breath. Going back into, because when I travel, I like to go visit random shelters because,
Uh-huh. Sure.
and I it's amazing the difference of what, when being out of the day-to-day shelter work for a
Mhm.
while now, going back into some of these shelters, I'm like, wow, no wonder my like nervous system was out of control and I was
Yeah.
tired at 4:30 every day. Like, I go in and I'm like, and the people there are used to it because they feel like they have to be.
Right.
Again, these are things that it's like, but let's see if we can make some shifts here. Like, what
Uh-huh.
can you can only control what you can control, right? It's just like, even if
Yes.
you're not a a leader of people, you can control greeting your coworkers with a smile. Like,
Yes.
I'm sure you say all these types of
Yeah.
things too. So going back to that environment and circling it back to Casco, one other cool product we have on our cat condos and some of our other stuff, we have this drawer that pulls out, but on top of the drawer, like, there's a piece on top of the drawer that is meant for people to step on so they can clean the tops of the kennel, so they can reach back in the
Yeah.
corners. so that they're not these rickety step ladders everywhere
Yes.
being shoved every which way. So those are the types of things that we're innovating, that we're starting to talk
Yeah.
about, and that we want feedback from people
Yeah.
in the field saying, "Hey, that would be really cool
Yeah.
if, we had." Again, that seems so small, but the amount of people who are like, "We could get rid of that old rickety stepladder that people
Uh-huh.
keep falling on,
Right.
and it's a drawer we
Or
can
even
actually
worse,
store."
they stand on a rolling chair because I've seen
Oh,
that. And
no,
getting
yeah,
up, whatever, like, "Oh my god, get off of that
yeah,
thing before you die." But, this is
yeah,
so funny because these are the kind of things that I guess my mind works that way too. But I always thought it was so crazy to go into animal hospitals, and of course, there's a bank of 3 cages, and the top ones are never used for anything but storage. And you
yeah.
go up there and there's a box of lactated ringers up there. And you think that is the heaviest thing we probably move in our hospital other than a big dog. And we have stuck it
Mhm.
over your head. And the other part is the cages are on the ground about this far up so that the
Yep.
humans who have to climb down in there to treat the animal. Now, I've not seen a dog, my personal dog here can jump into my lap, which is about 3 feet off the ground. Why can we not put them a big drawer under them that's waterproof, put lactated ringers in the bottom where all we have to do is pull them out, and then put the cages up higher so that we're not standing on our head to treat the animal in the bottom cage?
Yeah,
That's not hard to do. That is
yeah,
nothing but architecture and building it the
right.
way, logic says. When I built an animal hospital for one of my practice owners when I was the chief operating officer, and I said, you know what, we're going to put wire mold all the way across this bank here. And above it, we're going to have, cabinets up here that close up so that we can put towels up here. And we're not going to have to chase cords all over the treatment room floor to put in infusion pumps. We're just going to
Mhm.
plug them in here. It's thinking ahead. And, I think that veterinary architects, do a good job with some things, but they don't work in animal hospitals. They've not had to move things around. And the logistics of just, how you work. I think the staff needs input in that. And, I used to, when we were
100%.
building anything, and I've built 2 hospitals from the ground up and done 4 remodels in my working career as a manager, the plans were laid out in the break room and everybody came in and said, look and see where it's screwed up. Where do we need to move
Mhm.
something that doesn't make any sense? And then we will move it. We will talk about it and we'll move it. And by doing that, the people who are actually working in those areas of the hospital who knew where their pain points were able to help us solve them before the walls went up. Because after the walls go up is not the time to do that. That is
Right.
very expensive. But to think about it beforehand. So we need to have people involved that are actually doing the thing. And then think about how you move through a space. How are you going to
Mhm.
hit your hip on the corner every time you turn around and walk by this cabinet? Um, let's move the cabinet or let's round the
Right.
corner. That kind of stuff. But yeah, there
Yeah.
are a lot of studies from, neuroscience and human psychology about how clutter is exhausting to you and you don't even know it. And then noise is exhausting to you and you don't even
Mhm.
know it. So if you're emotionally constantly amped up, you're always on the edge a little bit. And the things maybe that, you would have shrugged off in a calm Zen environment are taking you down a bad path. And the other thing too, and I'm a customer service expert, your clients come into that environment and they're getting amped up because of the noise and the um, hubbub and the printing and the barking and the phone. So yeah,
Mhm.
obviously taking the phones off the front desk or turning the ringers down a little bit is a very good thing. But we don't pay attention to that. All right, we're just looking at where do we build a cabinet, where do we sit the lab equipment, and how many kennels can we put in a space. There's a lot more to
Yeah.
it than that.
I think with shelters too, there's kind of this front of house, just like with, I mean, similar to a vet hospital, but a
Mhm.
little different. Like there's a front of house area, right, where adoptions are happening, where the
Mhm.
public's coming in, and then there's a
Uh-huh.
back of house area. And I think for a long time, the front of house is the like, let's make that nice and
That's the
pretty and bright
showcase.
and modern.
Yeah.
But back of house, it's whatever.
Uh,
And again, I don't say that as anybody doing anything wrong. That's just kind of the way it's been.
yeah.
But now in these conversations is having people understand that that back of house is where your staff are, that's where your volunteers are, that could be where your foster parents are. And why should they have to almost suffer through
Yeah.
like well, let's kind of make sure that it's a consistent experience throughout. And for shelters too, it's like also right now this feels like front of house and this room over here is back of house, but that back of house room might end up becoming where adoptions have to happen,
Uh-huh.
or might end up being having to be used in a different way, or
Mhm.
you might have to start letting people back there. And so let's similar to what we've seen as a shift in veterinary medicine,
Uh-huh.
right? Kind of this change and like
Yeah.
in the back versus in the front. Like
Right.
I want shelters to feel that way too,
Yeah.
because the staff who are there day in and day out, the animals, the volunteers, everybody, it's like they also deserve a quiet,
Yeah.
bright, cohesive space. And that's, with Casco being able to provide all of that in the same entity and go back and forth with drawings and
Mhm.
model it out and kind of get that feedback in real time has been really incredible.
Mhm.
And to be able to say, and if this doesn't quite work for what you need, like, well, what do you need? And I'm not
Uh-huh.
saying you could say, like, make me a kennel that's 7 feet tall and 1 foot wide, and that's what we need. Like, we're gonna have a discussion about it, and we're
Yeah.
gonna use all of our different, thought processes and experiences, and come up with something that can be used in that space. So it's like a fun puzzle every time I get to
Yeah.
talk with the shelter of what they may or may not need, and whether it's a new build or renovating a current space or even just changing a hallway. It used to be a
Mhm.
hallway; it's a pretty wide hallway. I think we're gonna start having cats in there. How can we do it in like a way that's good for the cats, good for the people?
Right.
And that's where I think it's really great to bring like my experience, their experience, and then you bring somebody in who can actually do the drawings and the numbers and say,
Yeah.
if you put this here, the door is going to hit it.
Yeah.
That's what's so helpful is that we
Right.
could do
Yeah,
the whole
exactly.
thing at
Yeah.
once. Yeah, because
Yeah.
sometimes I'm like, I like they'll draw me these things and they'll be like, "Well, the door will hit it," and I'll be like,
Uh-huh.
"Oh, that's fine," and they're like, "It's not fine," And then I talk to the shelter, and we're both like, "I bet it'd be okay," and then we're like, "Wait a minute, no, no, we are
No.
creating our own chaos for the
Right.
sake of adding two more kennels. How can
Uh,
we shift the room differently or make a different choice?"
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, it's like a fun shelter Tetris or something
Yes.
every time. So I
Uh-huh.
love these conversations and love
Yeah.
getting to see what we can do to just make everybody's experience better.
It's so funny. The thing that when I was taking my fear-free training and of course and being involved with the advisory and learning all this stuff, the thing that I really struck me is our cat ward was an old, I mean, it was built in the 70s, right? So the cats spent their entire time boarding looking at other
Mm,
cats, which of course mostly pisses cats off, right? Because they
right,
don't like strange cats. And then we wonder why when we stuck our hands in there, they were exploding. And I thought, oh my gosh,
right.
think about that. Think about what we did to them for like they were boarding there for a week and they were having to stare at strange cats across a 3 foot alley the whole time they were there. But you don't know, right? You didn't know about restraint, and
Yeah.
you didn't know about distraction, and it was kind of fun. I remember going into a hospital, beautiful AHA accredited hospital up in Pennsylvania, and they were they were not fear-free certified, but they knew enough to be dangerous, right? So they were trying to do some things, and they were using treats, but they were using it like after the fact. And I went, the idea
Mm,
is not a reward for getting a shot like the lollipop when you went to the dentist when you were a kid. My dentist
right.
used to give me ice cream cone, or a certificate for ice cream cone, which I thought was kind of a business building proposition on his part. But it's the distraction of it. So I said, no, you're distracting the dog while you're doing it. And they were like, oh, I said, so they wanted to do, but they didn't really know to do. So I feel like a lot of that, the things that we did and the things that, there's probably, I mean, there's practices still out there, doing the things and using paper charts and the whole nine yards. Um,
Mhm.
and they haven't evolved in the last 20 years knowing what we know. But for the most part, the practices that I go into are really embracing doing better, and they're constantly looking to do better. And I feel like the smartest thing Fear Free ever did was to teach it in vet school, and that there's a
Mhm.
foundation out there in the universe of all these newer graduating veterinarians who learned it from the get-go. And
Yeah.
animals are certainly better off for that. So I will personally thank you for your work at Fear Free. and
Nothing.
all the people there who contributed so much to an amazing thing that, and you know, when I've heard feedback, well, like, you know, people just get charged for doing it. I mean, you get charged for all CE, you know, what's the big deal? But this has really made the lives of animals better and humans, with people who really
Mhm.
do embrace it and work in practice and shelter using these techniques, um, are getting a better experience as a worker because we go into it because we love animals and we don't want them to hate us. And then when
Mhm.
we are treating them in a way that acknowledges their mental health, um, they like us, you know. Then that's what we want. We want them to be glad to come in the door, and that's huge.
We want our industry and careers in them to be sustainable.
Yeah.
It has to be, again, when you talk about like the root, it's like, yes, of course we want to keep people where they are. We want to make sure they don't burn out, all of these things,
Hmm.
but we need to make sure that the positions that we're putting people in, we're creating sustainability around them,
Hmm.
because it doesn't do we need the people who are treating the animals. We have people who can talk about it,
Yeah.
and educate it, and we need those folks too. But sustainability in this industry is such a core personal mission of
Yeah.
mine, because I just think that I feel very lucky to have, I mean, I worked hard too, but I feel
Sure.
very
Yeah.
lucky that I was able to kind of join this industry and and be able to make a full career path out of
Hmm.
it. And still to this day, people are like, "Wait, what do you do? That's a job," which is always fun. I'm sure you get the same,
Yeah.
Debbie. It's like, "What is
Yeah. My
that?"
mother, I don't think my mother still gets what I do for a living. I really don't think she does.
Yeah. um, but I think that it's just so essential that, like, anybody who is in positions like ours, or in any positions to make change, or even if you're not, but making it sustainable for people who love animals, want to work with animals in whatever capacity that needs to look like, that they can really make that a career.
Yeah.
And I fell into it. I had, looking back in some of my parents are selling their our like family home, so I had to go home and go through boxes of my childhood stuff. And I always wanted to work with animals. I didn't
Uh-huh.
really know what that looked like. When you're in my age, everyone wanted to be a dolphin, like with
Uh-huh.
dolphins, or a marine biologist. That was like
Oh
the thing
yeah.
of my
Yeah.
generation. But I mean, I had stuff from my teachers saying that Tori is obsessed with dogs. Like, I had bold book reports of golden retrievers that I did. Like, I mean, I always knew I wanted to work with animals, and there wasn't a way to do that. And
Right.
so that was clear to me as a kid,
Mhm.
obviously. I had my same, like, I want to be a vet.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
terrible at
Yeah.
science and math and all the things. But I think that it's so important that we make people who, if this is their dream to work with animals,
Yeah.
that should be a realistic dream, because we
Uh-huh.
need those people. We
Yeah,
need the
we
folks
do.
who do that. And
We
it's
do.
up to us who've been here been around for a minute,
A
to help
minute.
make it
Yeah.
a
Yeah, a
sustainable
minute.
career. But I know when you said, I wrote in my bio, over 10 years, and I was like, oh, I got to change. I got to up that number. It's been way more
Keep
than 10
moving mine
years.
up too. Yeah. Keep moving mine up too. Because I started working
Just
as a
years and
part-time,
years at this point.
yeah, part-time receptionist in 1985. And I used to make a joke when I was teaching the Patterson classes and said, if you weren't born then, just don't even tell me that. I don't want to know.
Yeah.
But I've been doing it for quite a while. And it's kind of, looking back, it's kind of amazing is like what it was and where it is now and the things that we can do. And I kind of think, wow, I couldn't even have imagined when, you know, I spent my day talking about fleas and giving prednisone like candy back in the early 90s before monthly flea products came out. It was a completely different profession, just about. Um, but yeah, you're right. I mean, the sustainability of it. And one thing I think that probably our biggest failure is teaching people who, you know, kind of like me. At 5 years old, I was going to be a veterinarian. I went to NC State, I have a degree in animal science, and then changed my mind. But I think we don't tell people that there are, first of all, other careers that are peripheral, like ours, that they could get into and that they still can make a difference and be helpful. And then we don't tell them the reality of what being in veterinary practice is or in shelter medicine is and how much work there is done with the public. It is not about the medicine. It is so much about the customer, the client, and getting agreement because it doesn't matter how brilliant you are as a doctor. If you can't get your client to say yes, you don't get to do any of that stuff. So you've also got to be really good at communication and client service and reading people and have emotional intelligence to be able to communicate with people. And that's the part we don't really tell people because they just think, oh, I'm just going to be back here working with animals. It's all about the science, it's all about the medicine. And I think sometimes it is a shock when they get out and there's so much um, and the public is challenging. I mean, if you work in shelter, it's very challenging. And I said at some point it was probably the most thankless job I had ever worked in my life or done because the public is, you're never good enough, right? It's always your fault that these animals are being euthanized for behavior problems or you don't have room in the shelter. And we're like, man, I didn't breed them and turn them loose. Y'all did that. I'm just dealing with the after effects of it and trying to do the best we can. And there are certainly people out there who are great and the volunteers that come to help you. And we had so many people in our community that contributed money so that we could air condition the shelter and that we could put barriers up between the animals and make it safer for them. And then we actually started a fundraiser in our practice and pushed the county to build another shelter that had 3 times capacity and an animal hospital in it, which probably was, financially to our own detriment, but it was good for the animals. It was good for the community. There's a lot of pressure of working with the public and people who come from food service like me. I grew up in the restaurant business and had been doing it since I could walk. Uh, understand that. We understand how the public is and how to manage the public. And I feel like that's the piece of the puzzle that we really need to start banging a drum about because otherwise there's going to be a whole lot of people who come out and have spent 8 years of college and 12 years of their education focused on one thing and then be shocked at how much peopling they actually are doing every day. Yeah.
So much peopling. I volunteer with the Street Dog Coalition. We do veterinary clinics for vulnerable populations, and
Hmm.
we get so many amazing volunteers. And again, because I have said I'm not good at holding things or doing any, but I always work the front. Like I always help get the volunteers together
Uh-huh.
on the front side, so we can check people in, check people out, get them their stuff.
Hmm.
And that's always a big piece of conversation as people come and join us because I'm so happy to have their help. But it's that first time I'm helping them understand too, not only the communication with the public, how to set expectations, all of that,
Hmm.
how to approach people without judgment, and how to again understand the influence that you are about to put on this person,
Hmm.
um, on their perception of veterinary medicine, their perception of this nonprofit, their perception of how they treat their animal. Like, I mean,
Hmm.
all of these things, it has to come from such a positive place. Otherwise, we'll drive ourselves crazy. I mean, we
Yeah.
just, I think we have to, of course, there will be bad apples. There's bad
Yeah.
apples everywhere, and ultimately, people have to be seen as inherently good. Otherwise, and we have to make sure that is portrayed to
Yeah.
them because we want to see the animals have not just a good life but a great life and
Hmm.
create, to your point, creating that trust, getting people to say yes, getting people to understand what's happening, to their pet in front of them. They may have never seen their pet react that way
Hmm.
and they're like, whoa, I've never seen Fluffy growl before,
Uh-huh.
and you're like, well, let's explain where we're at right now.
Right.
This is whatever. That's such a big point of it. And just to reiterate what you said, the
Yeah.
people the peopling is the main part,
The peopling
whether
is the
you
main
want it
part.
to. There's very few jobs that get to be only hands-on animals. Almost, yeah, it's going to
Yeah.
be the peopling. It's going
Yeah,
to be the
always the peopling, always the peopling. And the
yeah.
peopling, you mentioned the puzzle of the Tetris of putting the things together. But to me, the people are my Tetris. And I really love
Mhm.
to figure out kind of where they're coming from and how to manage the puzzle pieces so that all the pieces do go together. And then we are not trying to put a square peg in a round hole because sometimes I feel like we do that. And it's a big, big mistake because people are all individuals. They all need custom tailored experiences. And that's not to say, you're going to sit there and study them for a while, but we have to be able to read and pay attention to other people. And so I feel like training that kind of stuff is incredibly important. And in shelter medicine, well, even in veterinary hospitals, it's really hard to not judge people because we have
Yes.
knowledge, right? And but we have to consider how fair is that? Because this is how we spend our lives. We are immersed in it every day, all day long. I mean, I look at my social media feed, it's nothing but vet med. I mean, I don't know what my friends are doing next week. I don't know when their birthdays are, but I can tell you what's in, certain technician Facebook groups and what their anxiety is at this point in the game. But our clients don't live there, right? They live in their space and in their world, and we cannot expect them to have the knowledge that we have. And when I was teaching Patterson, I said, look, it is so unfair for us to judge people by our yardstick because they don't know what
Exactly.
we know, and they never will until we teach them. And our main job is education. And when because I think people want to take good care of their animals, and if we can teach them how to do that as a partner rather than as this, judgy, you should have known better, how come you didn't see this kind of thing, um, then we're all going to have a better life, right? We're all going to get along
Hmm.
better. Our clients are going to love us. Their pets are going to get good care, and we're going to walk in the door every day looking forward to work rather than dreading walking in the door. So,
Exactly.
exactly. All right. Anything else you want to leave us with? Final words of wisdom? Anything that we missed? Because we went a long way. I
We
think.
did. I know, Debbie. I could talk to you forever. I would say, you know, the only thing I'll just leave on this is for anybody who might be listening, like just operate within what you can control. And I have a lot of opinions. I know you have a lot of opinions. We have big opinions, small, big, and everywhere in between. And I can only control what I can control. So whether you're an executive, maybe with a lot of things you can control, you
Mhm.
can change the direction of a company to somebody who is a middle manager to somebody who's an independent contributor, assessing what you can control and whether that be, like I mentioned earlier, greeting your colleague with a smile and being hopeful and believing people are good,
Yeah.
to creating processes and streamlining things that will make your team's lives easier and yours, to maybe the bigger pieces. I just think, I would love to see more positivity in our industry. There is a lot. I'm not saying that it's all
Oh yeah.
negative, but I hope people don't get too caught in the weeds of everything we need to do, and also can take and look back and say, wow, look how far we've come, and how can I personally
Yeah.
contribute to what we need to do
Yeah.
moving forward. So
Exactly.
um I love this industry. I'm
Yeah.
excited to be here. I can't believe still to this day I made a career out of this. It still blows my mind sometimes, but
Yeah.
I'm excited to be here and can't wait to see what else we get to do.
I look back and I planned on staying in the animal hospital 5 years because my profit sharing
Yep.
plan maxed out at 5 years, and then I was going to go look for another job. And here we are, 40 some years later. I'm still here,
Yeah.
but still love it, still do it. And I love what you said, like control yourself. Wash your own coffee cup, pick up after yourself in the break room. It seems like a small thing, like I don't have time, but it's one of those little aggravations that where other people have to clean up your mess that's kind of starts the degeneration of a culture in a hospital because
Mhm.
it's an entitled move and people don't think it's fair. And one of the things that is very, very important, especially in the culture of the United States, is we are a culture of fairness. And when things are not fair, that's when we get bent out of shape. So try to keep things fair and
Yeah.
um, do the little things, do the medium things, do the big things, but do the things that you can do and do it the best you can.
I was gonna say, as a great Taylor Swift said, keep your side of the street clean, and I'll just
Yeah,
leave it
there
at
you
that. So,
go. There you go.
but
Yeah,
yes, it's been a real pleasure, Debbie. Thank you
yes.
so much for this
Thank you very much.
time.
I appreciate your time and the audience. I appreciate your time visiting with us today on the Bend. And um, if you want to get in touch with Tori, we're going to have her information in the show notes. And I encourage you to, take these little words to heart. We've both been doing it quite a while and have had successful careers in it and still enjoy what we do. And it is absolutely possible to do that in vet med. So we are examples on the hill. Follow our path, right?
I love
All
it.
right.
Yes.
Thank you again.